Hello.
Hello and welcome to Sound Librarian. I'm Stefan Schutz. The original PlayStation was another one of those consoles which kind of passed me by. It was at a time when I was traveling and not in a position to buy a console, so I just sort of missed that one. That entire generation I kind of missed. I'd had consoles before it, I had consoles afterwards, but the PlayStation 1 I kind of missed. I did, however, get to play one of the games that was very, very significant on the original PlayStation because it was also released on PC. And the game I'm talking about is Abe's Odyssey, or Oddworld, I believe it was Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. One of the remarkable things about Abe's Odyssey was that in so many ways it was years ahead of its time. Compared with all the other games that were coming out at the time, it had incredible graphics. It had really smooth flowing game control and gameplay. It had really quite an interesting story, and it had really, really significant audio. In fact, audio played a major part in the gameplay. The main character, Abe, has a series of vocalizations that he will make, words that he can say and other things that he does. The game involves having to actually move through various screens without making any sound. And you can actually, walk on tiptoes to avoid that. And there are creatures in there that respond to sound and you control them and make sounds. So this is a game that was really, really significant. And yet I think, even though it was a popular game, I think people sort of underestimated some of the design aspects that went into Abe's Odyssey. And it's only years later that people are starting to adopt some of the things that Abe's Odyssey had from a storytelling point of view, multiple endings and things like that. So we're going to have a listen to Abe's Odyssey and really have a look at how significant it still is even today. Let's have a look.
This is Rupture Farms. They say it's the biggest meat processing plant on Oddworld. I used to work here. Well, I was really a slave, like all the others.
When I first started putting together the list of games that I wanted to include in the 101 Games series, I didn't actually even consider Abe's Odyssey. And it's not because I didn't consider it to be a good game. In all honesty, I'd pretty much forgotten about this game. It's a game I played many, many years ago, and it's something that at the time I think didn't even really register with me how important the sound aspects were to the game. So this is obviously before I was working in the industry. And it was actually when I was referencing another game that it reminded me of this, and I thought, oh, that's right. I had a bit of a think about it and then had a look at it and realized that I'd forgotten completely how many aspects of Abe's Odyssey were very, very relevant to audio within games.
We're through. We still made Paramite pie.
So the production qualities in general of Abe's Odyssey were, I think, really, really very advanced for when this game came out. The quality of the pre-rendered movies that we're watching now were really, really, if they weren't the top of the heap at the time, then they were very, very close to. And what was most impressive to me was that when you actually zoom into the real game, because of the way in which they'd made the gameplay screens looked as good as the cutscenes, because a lot of the backgrounds were pre-rendered and you just moved around in front of them. Regardless of the technique that they used, the game was very, very good looking for the era in which it was produced, and the sound design was outstanding. But it was more than just the quality of the audio, it was the fact that the audio itself actually played a key role within the gameplay. Abe has a series of vocalizations, and a lot of the other creatures have a series of vocalizations as well. You actually need to use Abe's vocalizations as part of the game. You communicate with the other Murdercons by saying hello to them and giving them very simple vocal commands, and they respond to those. The ability to control some of the violent creatures is done by Abe's little chant. And again, once you have controlled those creatures, you also sometimes use their vocalizations within the gameplay element. So this is a game from many, many years ago where audio was a critical part of the actual gameplay. The sound design itself within the game was really, really very good. This is a PlayStation 1 era game. Now, the limitations of that platform were quite considerable. And so for a lot of games, audio was an afterthought. And when they did want to put audio in, they were quite often quite limited with it. And you notice there, really nice little scripted events. That enemy was never going to run onto the screen until I jumped up. Gives you a sense of there being, and again, here, gives you a sense of there being some sort of pursuit going on, but you're not in any danger at this point in view because they're all scripted. A lot of these sorts of techniques didn't start getting used in general game design for many, many years. So Abe's sounds in general are fairly basic. You've got the sounds of his big feet flapping away and some exertion sounds when he jumps and climbs. They are all fairly standard. And those in themselves are not anything that are particularly unusual for a platform game of this style. And there are sounds in here that are used somewhat repetitively. That's hardly surprising because of the limitations of the platform. But I didn't really feel that there were many annoyingly repetitive sounds. I felt in general it had a pretty good implementation of the sound design. And in fact, in quite a few cases where there are sound effects that you hear over and over again, they've done really quite a good job of adding in variety, which again is something that not for many years did I hear that being used in games. So here I've used Abe's little chant to take control of the slig, and I can run across the screen controlling the slig, and I can talk to the other slig, and I can remove the other slig. The other thing from a design point of view that's interesting about this is that Abe has really no offensive abilities whatsoever, except for taking control of the other characters, and you're limited where you can do that. So this is a really, really interesting thing from the point of view of Abe basically is a character that you just have to play the entire game just trying to keep him alive.
Hello. Follow me. Okay. Wait. Okay.
So you rescue the other characters of your race by talking to them, asking them to follow you, and leading them to somewhere where you can take them to safety. Again, music has been used very sparingly in this game. That's another interesting design decision. They decided not to have permanent wallpaper background music playing all the time.
It'll follow me. Okay.
So I've managed to save a couple of characters, and I've been given the appropriate audio cues for that sort of event happening, the little sort of musical fanfare, and then I get to move on through the environment.
It'll follow me. Okay. Wait. Okay. It'll follow me. Okay.
We also have some rooms, like the meat crushing room here, where there's just a lot going on, visually, and obviously from an audio point of view. It's noisy, it seems dangerous, you're left with no doubt as to the environment you're in. So we've skipped forward here to, I've now gotten out of the meatworks, and I'm in the outside area trying to escape. We have environmental sounds again. We have sounds of in that particular screen, the beams that I'm trying to avoid. Sounds of the creatures that I have to try and avoid. And sounds of when I get eaten. I think what surprised me about this game, going back and looking at it, is that a game that is this old still stands up really, really quite well, even though the maximum resolution this game can be running is 640 by 480. The game still looks beautiful, and the game still sounds beautiful. And this, I think, is a real testament to the quality of the design. Especially this area escaping through the outside area, where we've just got beautiful backgrounds visually and really, really good uses of light and shade. I mean, the silhouettes of the creatures in the pens beneath are very, very well done. And so they've made use of the limitations both the limitations of the graphics and the limitations of the sound capabilities of the PlayStation and PCs at the time, and yet produce something really, really high quality. The game is, I will say, is incredibly difficult. This is a really, really challenging game. So what this game, I think, demonstrates very well to me is it is possible to make a really, really high quality game without having to have tons and tons of content. And in this case, I'm speaking specifically about the audio content. Abe's Odyssey, as I've said, does not have hundreds and thousands of sounds. It has a handful of sounds because of the capability of the platform. And yet, the game does not suffer for this. The game feels lush and alive. And there are hidden things all over the place that you find. These glowing creatures here. You're informed to chant at this point. And when you chant, these glowing creatures provide little pieces of information for you. So they've even incorporated the tips during the game into the environment. So there's no artificial tutorial manner being presented to you. I mean, even earlier on, some of the tutorial things were incorporated into the display screens within the factory. I find the music really, really suits the game. The characters are great. The character voices are amazing. They're all done by one person. And the sound design, whilst, as I've said, is simple, is incredibly effective. Having to do levels like this one here where you're stealthing and having to creep along. You get to hear Abe's footsteps as he creeps, and the little creaky footsteps. They've really, the attention to detail in this game is really, really quite outstanding. I would like to compare this with some more games of its era, but I think Abe's Odyssey definitely was one of the games that established the bar for the PlayStation 1 era of game design, and it's well and truly worth checking out. And it is available. You can still buy it on PC. This is one of those sorts of titles that's been re-released, and you can buy it very, very cheaply. So it's a game that if you do want to check out, you can actually still purchase it.
What I found interesting when I was playing through Abe's Odyssey, now I bought a brand new version on PC. Well, it's now available by download to buy the PC version for a couple of dollars, so it's incredibly cheap. The resolution for Abe's Odyssey is set to 640 by 480. And stretching that across my laptop screen, which has a far higher resolution than that, I was originally expecting Abe's Odyssey to look fairly bad. But their use of light and colour, silhouettes, it still looks as good in a lot of ways now as it did years and years and years ago. And the sound is still outstanding. The music is incredible. The storyline is great. The dialogue, the voice acting is really, really good. So there's so much in this old game that is just as good today as it was when it first came out. I really highly recommend you have a look at Abe's Odyssey. You can buy it for PC. It is a couple of dollars. Please check it out. It's well worth having a listen to. and please keep an eye out for future videos. Thank you very much for watching.